Hi folks, Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Bren, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. It's an honor. It's so great to get to talk to folks who are interested in the new economic models. That's being just a fisherman, I didn't think this would ever happen.
Well, Bren, it's so great to have you on the show, and I'd love for you to start with a description for our listeners. What is ocean farming, and how does ocean farm differ from planting a seed in the ground and then harvesting a head of broccoli and bringing it to market that way?
Sure. First, I'd say ocean farming, there's over 50 terms that have been, there's academic counted up all the different ways people talk about the way we farm the ocean. And it's as bad as, this is terrible names developed by scientists, IMPA, which is integrated multi-trophic aquaculture, which I still don't know what that is. And then there's like mariculture and aquaculture. I just decided to start as a simple man, I decided to start in a simple place and to say, okay, we're ocean farming, and we're going to do a particular type of ocean farming. And really, I think the difference is I don't know anything about land. I spend as little time on land as possible. It's just sort of stressful. I think the key difference is that we have zero inputs. So, you get a tomato, you got to plant a tomato seed, you got to water it, you got to fertilize it, you got to have a greenhouse, you harvest it, and then it goes to market. And it's, I think, a globally competitive market. As we know from the Immokalee workers and things like that, the price point is really low. It's hard to make a living growing tomatoes or kale or things like that. As we know, in 2012, 91% of land-based farmers didn't make money. They lost. I think it was $1,200 was the average. I think what we're trying to do is take all the lessons learned from that we've been watching on land-based agriculture and not make the same mistakes. Like, let's do food right and let's blank slate the ocean. So we pick species, not like fish that you have to feed, that you have to use antibiotics and things like that. What we do is zero input species. So everything we grow requires no fresh water, no fertilizer, no feed, and of course, no land. And the key there is not only the environmental benefits, but also in the era of a new climate economy, as water prices go up, feed, fertilizer prices, energy prices go up, zero input food is going to be the most affordable food to grow and the most affordable food to eat. We're going to be eating zero input food. There's no question. I mean, the question for us is it going to be economically viable long term, and is it going to be delicious climate cuisine, or is it going to be like the force fed, cod liver oil?
So, Bren, you were just recently in Korea, correct? Or with a large conference. Could you talk about some of your observations there at that conference around sort of the state of other people pursuing this type of endeavor, and maybe are they doing it economically? And
it was really interesting. It was the first gathering of 40 people from around the world who do polyculture in the ocean. And there were people who do salmon with seaweed and shellfish. There are people that just do different kinds of seaweed. People that just do shellfish. And really, how do you take a piece of ocean and grow as many species as possible and make it economically viable? So I went there to learn so much, and I did. It was a very dorky crowd. We were all pulling up diagrams of our farms and talking about different anchor systems. It was really nitty gritty, which was amazing. What was surprising to me is that on the polyculture front, there is not one example out there of a profitable polyculture farm. They are all science-based farms run by grants. And as soon as the grants have run out, then the fishermen or whoever's working the farms have dropped out because quite honestly, the main thing is they're growing these things and there aren't strong markets to sell them at a price point that makes it profitable. So that was shocking, I think, to me. And we're ahead of the curve on that because we actually have a profitable model and we're sort of functioning. And suddenly we became the example of, God, that you can scale this stuff. Like it works in the real world. It's not just great in the science papers. Of course, the Asian societies have been doing this for 1,000 years. They've been doing seaweed and just incredible at it, really at scale. I mean, it's just stunning to see, thousands and thousands of acres of seaweed farms. It is still monoculture. And the other thing is, their labor costs have been so low and it has such a long tradition that the way they farm is really, really sort of labor intensive. So a hatchery, they'll have 300 workers there weaving seaweed into the line, something that we're able to do literally in a couple hours. What's happened, I think, is we're looking more like India in terms of ocean farming, where we have no tradition of it here, and we're going to hop over that industrial revolution that India largely jumped over and go right into a different economy, like a cell phone economy. Not a lot of problems with India analysis, but just it's sort of a large scale conceptual thing. So we're a bit ahead of the curve. We have a ton to learn, but their systems are very expensive. Our system is extremely cheap, and that's been the secret of replication. I mean, anybody with 20 acres in a boat, $20,000 can start their own farm, be farming the first year. This is the nail salon model of the sea, and that's what you need, both so that this replicates and so average people, regular folks like me, can get into this and start their own farms. You don't have to be a Google or an Amazon to play at the strain.
So compared to this model of high labor, maybe centralized in one or two factories, your vision is more of a regionally replicable model with plenty of labor, but maybe more distributed across many different smaller scale enterprises along our coastlines?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple thoughts here. One is, I care. Like one of my slogans is, there aren't going to be any jobs or food on a dead planet. I'm not an environmentalist. I believe in restoring and protecting ecosystems because it allows me to spend my life supporting my family on the ocean, right? So the jobs piece is key. The question on the jobs piece is, and for sustainability in general, is what's the sweet spot in terms of, if I do everything physically on my boat, which I did for way too long, my body is destroyed. I mean, I crawl out of bed like a lobster or crab in the morning. It's I'm blind in one half eye. Like, what's the sweet spot of sort of of automation on my boat to save my body? And then in the plants, anywhere where there's carpal tunnels, we probably want to automate that piece, right? So we want to create lots of jobs, but then I think the key is we don't want a vertical infrastructure. We don't want, a CEO, a company, that's owning all these farms, that owns the factories and then owns the market. We want distributed. We want what we think of as a green wave reef, which is network productions of 25 to 50 farms in an area, a seafood hub and hatchery placed in a struggling low-income community, a ring of big institutional buyers, the Googles, the universities, stuff like that, and then a ring of entrepreneurs doing value-added products, the kelp turkeys, the biofuels, the fertilizers, and then you take that green wave reef and you replicate it every 200 miles. And to me, that's a form of distributed productions, distributed ownership. I mean, as a farmer and a fisherman, I don't want to work for anybody. The last thing, I will spend my life losing money just so I don't have a boss, right? And they call it a sticky profession. You need agency. And in the new economy, and those of us that are thinking about what are new models of ownership and incentives to move people into these new industry, it really is agency. It's the ability to own your own business while addressing some of the biggest economic and environmental challenges of our time. I think the old economy has an agency deficiency, and we're really hoping to fix that. The other piece here I'll just say is the trouble aquaculture had was it industrialized right away in the 80s and 90s. I used to work on the big salmon farm, and it tried to grow around existing tastes. So it grew salmon and tunas and things like that, what people wanted to eat. Well, that was stupid because what we need to grow, like that palate came around an industrial fishery. And then we just decided to farm it without asking the questions, are these the right species to farm on the economic front and on the like nutritional? So instead we asked the oceans, okay, what does it make sense to grow? And then structure around that. And that's why we move all the way to the other end to grow zero input species, just shellfish and seaweeds, and have it be a structure of the farm so we don't have a lot of infrastructure because we don't have to fight gravity underwater in any meaningful way. So let's use that and come at this problem the other way. So I think the polyculture community is still obsessed with, okay, how do we embed some seaweeds into a salmon farm to make a salmon farm better? Well, that's not economically viable, and it still remains tethered to fish. And maybe we'll get to fish. Salmon farming and stuff has gotten much, much better over the years in terms of feed conversions and waste and stuff like that. But we can get started on the other end and have zero of those problems, and in fact be restoring ecosystems, like moving way beyond sustainability.
You touched on two really, really important points among many others. And just to underscore, we're so grateful that the book Drawdown, Paul Hawken's new book, The Most Comprehensive Plan to Reverse Global Warming, just came out, and plant-rich foods is number 4 on this ranking, the series of important solutions to reverse global warming. So I'm really grateful that you underscore this idea that we can eat what fish eat to get our essential nutrients to fuel our growing human populations.
It's amazing. I was just hanging out with the folks at Pie Ranch, right out in your area there. And the light bulb went off and we're like, oh, we're both doing polyculture. Right? I mean, that's like we're engaged in the same thing, polyculture on land and polyculture in sea. And how do we bridge that? Right? The ideas are the same. How do we do the circular economy or regenerative economy, whatever the sort of term that folks are sort of comfortable using? And, how do we address social justice issues, economic issues? You have climate farmers and climate cuisine, all these same sets of questions. How do we break down the identity of a farmer and a fisherman so that they're spending half the year growing mushrooms in shipping containers and the other half growing kelp on their 20 acres, offshore? Like there's so much opportunity to build a bridge, and too often our thinking about the food system stops at the water's edge. And I think all of the potential, it's potential to go big. I mean, the World Bank just did a report. This is a stunning number that I almost don't even feel comfortable saying because it's at such scale. If you were to take 5% of U.S. waters and turn them into seaweed and polyculture farms, it would create 50 million direct jobs. I mean, that is just like, and the equivalent of 69 trillion hamburgers in terms of protein and food, right? I mean, so you want to think big, and you want you want this not to be just like boutique farmers market stuff or Brooklyn bee farms on roofs, which is all great, but we're not going to lift communities out of poverty. We're not going to take the people that were left behind in the industrialized economy, the black and brown folks, the immigrants that are so important to our economy, and put them in the front of the line unless we're talking about hundreds of thousands of opportunities for people. And so that's where the excitement is. And it's an industry that can go to scale if we structure it the right way, and an industry that can really, be a piece in the drawdown puzzle of helping restore the planet.
You spoke to some really core commitments that Lift Economy has been pursuing and dreaming about and envisioning since our inception, this model of principles and patterns of restorative economies in all aspects of our essential human needs, in food, in ocean restoration. The principles are the same whether you're a land-based farmer or an ocean farmer. And I appreciate you even describing a vision of a job that potentially one could weave in both, because I think that really does speak to the holistic elements of your vision. I want to ask about one specific element that I think is really critical to this, and that is you've made a commitment to partnering to launching your nonprofit Greenwave. And part of that, I think, has to do with being able to open source the model to some extent. Can you talk a little bit about this open source philosophy of yours?
Sure. So, I experiment with the farming for like 15 years. And just real quick, let me draw a picture for folks, because it's, there's nothing much to see out there when you go out, and it's hard for people to picture it. So sort of just picture an underwater garden where you've got sort of hurricane-proof anchors on the edges of the farm, up to buoys on the surface, and then just strung across those buoys horizontal. Below, we have ropes. And it's just a simple scaffolding system made out of rope. And from there, we grow our kelp vertically downwards We grow our mussels and scallops and lanternettes and mussel socks. And then below that on the seafloor, we have our oyster cages and then clams down in the mud. The key is it's vertical, so we have extremely small footprints, but can grow a huge amount of food in small areas. And it's just so cheap to build, right? And that goes to the open source question. Did this for a bunch of years, and then I decided, well, my goal isn't to become, quite honestly, a huge company owner, a CEO of something. It's much more, I want to die on my boat one day with 10,000 new ocean farmers out there along our coast, and that sort of is my what drives me. And so decided to take my model and open source it, and created Greenwave. And Greenwave is a nonprofit, which does three things. One, it trains a new generation of ocean farmers. Two, it does a policy required to make sure our seas are protected and the ocean planning happens the right way. And three, the R&D to stay ahead of the climate curve. What species should be growing? How do we do mobile hatcheries and mobile processing centers, things like that. And the training program, a farmer gets a couple things. They get small grants if it's needs based. They get free seed for 2 years. They get our support for 2 years. So they can just call us up and we go to the farms and help them. They come to us. And it's a 2-year program. And then they get a cold weather gear from Patagonia, who's been an incredible supporter and sponsor of ours. And then the last thing is we guarantee to purchase 80% of what they grow for 3 to 5 years. And that's been the secret, right? Where people can come in, they can build a farm for $20,000 and they can know whatever they grow, they can sell. And that's been sort of the game changer. And just to clarify, the structural ecosystem, I have my farm, Pimple Island Ocean Farm, that, allows me to live my life the way I want to and stay happy and not do conference calls all the time. And then we've got Greenwave, which is the nonprofit, and then Sea Green Farms is sort of the ambitious, larger for-profit. Greenwave, like I said, does training, policy, and R&D. Sea Green does the capital-intensive infrastructure, processing plants, stuff like that, and market development. The weakness of my model is that it's cheap to do stuff out in the ocean because you don't have to feed and you don't have to fight gravity. When you hit land, stuff's expensive, right? It gets more like land-based farming. And so we have those two entities sitting side by side. And the question for us always is, what part of this ecosystem is for-profit? What part of it is non-profit? What part of it is break-even? It's not either or. I think many of our folks in our investment community and our non-profit community, it's almost too ideological, like you have to do one or the other. No, we need a complex approach, all hands on deck, and knowing what kind of money when to build something from the ground up and to make sure it's profitable. I think that's what we've been trying to do. The replicability, the open source thing, I think has created a bit of a tidal wave. I didn't know any of this was going to happen, and it's sort of a challenge now because we're so low on capacity on the nonprofit side, is that we have requests to start farms in every coastal state in North America and 20 countries around the world. And our farmers are Iraq vets, they're indigenous folks, they're Latinos, they're 11th generation fishermen, they're lobstermen, and they're land-based farmers. We have a flood of young land-based farmers that can't afford land. They've been stuck on sort of a neo-feudal system, working on other people's lands. They can't afford buildings, all that sort of stuff. They come to us, and this is cheap and easy. So Nick Pastor is one of our new farmers. He was 8 years on dairy and organic farms, dreamed to have his own farm, was searching for land for all those years, couldn't afford it. We have him up, and he's leased his property, and he'll be up and growing by next season.
That's incredible. I want to talk a little bit about the economics for the farmer. So currently, how does it work? Do you currently guarantee to purchase from these farmers? Are any of them at commercialization where you are purchasing and their seaweed is going to, or is that still in process as you build the capital intensive infrastructure?
Oh no, we're the Greenwave Reef is up and running. We're buying farmers. We got 10 farms out there that are growing at different levels. Some are more experimental because we had to test whether the sites were good growing areas, and some were, some aren't. We have other farmers growing at scale, like 50,000 pounds and stuff like that. We're right now, my team is up getting thousands of pounds, both from Maine and Rhode Island coming up. Our processing plant can handle 5,000 pounds of kelp a day. We have a hatchery network of 3 hatcheries, the largest hatchery network in the country, and we're just about to expand after this season to a new 10,000 square foot facility that we have. So no, folks are already, they were paid last year, and they're getting paid this year, but this year's at a higher scale because Sea Green Farms has been able to scale up the processing. And here's the thing. I mean, we've been working on a sort of social network and marketing storytelling strategy for a lot of years on this. As soon as we scaled, we have standing orders for 600,000 pounds of kelp alone, and we can't meet that, right? So we're trying to expand and train farmers as fast as possible. We'll be at 25 next year, and that reef will be complete. And that's why we feel confident now that it's time to begin moving to other places like California, Norway. What happened to me originally was this idea came out, and again, it wasn't wholly, I mean, you come up with ideas from stealing from everybody. It's sort of a Woody Guthrie method, right? And what we did was synthesize, right? So literally hundreds of years of experience of trying to grow things in the ocean. We brought it in under the rule of simplicity and replicability. I think that was the innovation.
And most of this is happening in and around Long Island, correct? So just for the fun of it, if our listeners wanted to get a taste of some of these amazing ways that you're incorporating kelp into the American diet, would they be able to go to a restaurant in New York City and purchase a meal with some of your farmers' kelp? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're just harvesting, literally started this week. This is the water temp moment where we start pulling kelp out of the water. And then it's at places like Superiority Burger in the Village that Brooke Headley, who was an incredible pastry chef, like award-winning pastry chef, and moved into vegetables really. And what's been really interesting for us is for years I worked with seafood chefs, and they are not the sweet spot for this. They bring the same spice mixes and sort of, techniques of seafood and wraps around fish and seaweed salads. No, you need people that know nothing about seafood, and that's Brooke. He knows vegetables, right? So I gave him this kelp. First thing he did was barbecue kelp noodles with parsnips and breadcrumbs. Like he understood this had to do with sort of crunchiness and nuttiness and like treating it like a vegetable. And this is where it gets exciting for the chef community. I mean, there are 10,000 edible plants in the ocean and a couple hundred kinds of shellfish. I mean, kelp is just the gateway drug to an entirely new cuisine. I mean, imagine being a chef in 2017 and finding out there are arugula, spinaches, tomatoes, corns that you've never tasted before, never cooked with before. Suddenly this makes sort of the climate crisis a little more palatable and not feel like we're just going to be, it's not going to be a recreation of that movie, The Road. And the other thing on the economic piece, so we guarantee the farmers purchasing. We're able to do that and still be profitable at the other side. And we set rates based on my experience as a farmer of how much you can make per acre. And it comes to just, about the same profitability of kale, right? And a lot of kale farms, it's around, $40,000 per acre. We're like $37 per acre, excluding the labor cost for the farmer, right? So that's not in there. So you scale that up and it makes it very viable. You can actually make a living doing that. And again, that's really important. The other thing is there can be multiple income streams on a farm, if you an individual farm. So it can be in quadrants. You can sell food in one quarter as profits. You can do, of course, the ecotourism. I mean, our farms are community spaces where people, because anybody can both swim and fish on the farm. It's a community space where folks come and they swim through the kelp forests and the scallops and things like that. We invite people on, and that can be an income stream. The other thing is we use our farms as data centers. So we're collecting data. This is still in the early stages. We're actually trying to raise money right now for data centers to put on 10 of our farms to collect nitrogen, carbon, phosphorus, other attempts to do real-time monitoring, which will both allow our farmers to become better farmers, which is key. The Excel spreadsheet is the secret to farming in many ways, but then also sell that data to the scientific community because it's way cheaper for us to do it, for them to build a farm. And then then that leads into the fourth quadrant, which is ecosystem services, nitrogen and carbon trading programs. We have a program here in Connecticut, new legislation to include shellfish and seaweed farmers in the nitrogen trading program. It's the only program like this in the country. We know that a 20-acre farm right now under current trading, rates for carbon and nitrogen can make $12,000 in carbon and nitrogen credits. Those are World Bank numbers. And so that's not a huge amount of money because carbon's too cheap right now, but it's not only a proof of concept, that covers your insurance and fuel and maintenance costs for the year, right? It shaves off some of that overhead and really honors the role of the ocean farmer in providing benefits while everyone else is polluting.
I'm really glad you reminded us of those ecosystem benefits, especially given that, it may come somewhat from carbon markets or World Bank incentives, but largely, are you seeing it come from consumer demand in the form of products that consumers feel better about and feel like they're actually making a difference through their food choices?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, listen, we're not selling a commodity, right? What we're selling is a vision of the world that's farm, a plate that actually helps address the huge challenges, inequality, climate crisis, things like that. And it's something it's a dinner plate we can gather around to build an alternative, right? While everybody else sort of sinks our ship and turns America around, there's those that we can all come together and actually build the future. So we can show it, like this is concrete and real. And this is really important to me. Like a lot of, say, the progressive new economy movement, great ideas, but very little actually on the ground, practical, scalable things that we can point to. That's no one's fault, but it's time to get concrete in a serious way because the challenges we face are significant. I mean, for the consumer, look how, it's just a straight shot. We soak up 5 times more carbon than land-based plants. The New Yorker called our farm the culinary equivalent of the electric car. We filter nitrogen out of the water column, nitrogen from over-fertilizations that cause the spreading dead zones. We function as artificial reef systems. So the best fishing in the entire area is on my farm. My farm gets surrounded by gill nets by commercial fishermen and recreational fishers come in. And then lastly is storm surge protection. So on the East Coast, there were trillions of oysters on our coast, and they actually slowed down storm surges. There's lots of evidence of this, collected over the years. Well, we're creating these structures, which just, it's not a lot now because we don't have a lot of farms, but we're creating these structures which can protect coastal communities.
So, Bren, I had the incredible privilege and opportunity, thanks to Greenwave, to be connected with our local California advocate and aspiring 3D ocean farmer, Dan Marquez, who lives in Santa Barbara. Could you talk a little bit about your relationship with Dan and the work that he's done with Greenwave in Long Island, but also the aspirations around the model he's seeking to build here in Santa Barbara?
Absolutely. I mean, Dan is our sort of working class genius on the East Coast. I think Dan is fulfills my dream of fading away, not being central to this, and I can go return my farm while people like Dan innovate. He's been working with us for about 3 years now, and he has a lease in Santa Barbara that was sort of granted to him by a scientist at UC Santa Barbara who had been working on polyculture for 30 or 40 years. And so Dan's going to set up a farm there. And it's going to be the first polyculture farm and the first commercial seaweed farm. And so he came out here, he visited our farm, we've been working with him. He came out and helped build and really redesigned our hatchery system. He brought so much of his own talent and genius to improving the way we grow in our hatcheries. And so, and he's a great story. I mean, half indigenous, half Latino, I think fifth generation. He talks about his family reunions, and they have to stop counting at 750 people. I mean, he's dug in deep in that community. And and his wife is just an incredible social entrepreneur, really trying to figure out, okay, how do you do the value added product? So they're just a great team. He's on our board, and we're just really excited to work with him. Right now, he's going through the permitting process, which is going to be a complicated process, which is good in that we want to do this the right way, right? We want ocean planning, spatial planning to be careful. We want buy-in from all sorts of different stakeholders, and that's what we did out the East Coast, and we need to do it right on the West Coast as well. I think on a policy front, what always is front and center on my mind is make sure we don't put the barriers of entry high and not put them on the farmer. So, like, if it costs $100,000 to put in a farm because of the permitting requirements, then that's only large-scale companies will be able to do that. We need to have that low to non-existent. That's all in Connecticut here, and Rhode Island, some other places. That's all taken care of by the state or by universities. So Dan needs to do a site plan, an environmental impact assessment plan. And UC Santa Barbara and all these different people can help with that, and do that really the right way. So we're protecting eelgrasses and achieving the goals. But that cost has to be low. So there's those kinds of questions and challenges that we want to think through and do right in California. I think as we build a green reef in each area, it's going to look different. It needs to be a different strategy and really sort of designed around local needs. One of the interesting questions that sort of is floating out there is sort of listen, our oceans are a blank slate. The history of U.S. aquaculture has been just sort of failure after failure. So how do we do this right? And our ocean conservation allies, they're kind of stuck in the last century. And the reason is what they're really thinking about. It's important to do, but it doesn't address the core concerns. So most of the efforts is in ocean conservation, building marine parks, conservation zones. Now that is wonderful and we need to do that. But we could set aside our entire oceans as a conservation zone and they're still going to die. I mean, climate change is expected to wipe out 1 out of 4 species, threaten them with extinction, right, in the coming years. Our food system's being pushed out to the ocean. The water wars in California show that. Major fish are overexploited and our oceans just can't bear the burden of this major shift. We need solutions to climate change if we want to protect our oceans and if we want to revive them. And this is why our vision is of ocean conservation zones with ocean farms, 3D ocean farms embedded in these conservation zones, working as engines to breathe life back into our marine parks. Right? If you're an ocean conservationist and you don't have a strategy of restoration, of breathing life, of creating jobs, of feeding the planet, while actually truly remediating and restoring our waters, you're not an environmentalist. You're a Teddy Roosevelt conservationist. You need a solution to climate change. You need to grapple with its implications. Right? You can't. Climate change is a game changer, as we all know. None of us are deniers, but have we really thought through what needs to change at the economic level, the way we look at our resources in order to address this? I mean, as Naomi Klein says, this changes everything. And we all have to ask ourselves, what does this change from our current model and our ideologies and the traditions we come out of?
I think this vision of small, decentralized, grassroots social enterprises and economies as a catalyst for conservation, not just conservation, but regeneration that you hold and you at Greenwave and all of your allies and partners is really the critical nutrients that I think a lot of people are yearning for and craving. So I'm so appreciative of your leadership in holding that line and holding us to that standard. And there's actually, to your point about the challenges in California, I also, when I was down visiting Dan, had the opportunity to meet with some aspiring farmers in San Diego that are actually working within public partnerships that agencies are actually looking to help support some of those costly permitting. And so I think I am so grateful for the leadership at Greenwave that has made these pathways possible for so many entrepreneurs to now keep pushing forward and persisting even with the challenges. So I'm excited to keep the collaboration with you and keep seeing what's emerging in California.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. And I'm excited for the new economy modeling. I think we need more than one model, and then we need to refer back and take lessons and see what makes sense where. So here in New England, we really did a sort of a beautiful, messy, way where we were doing piece by piece. We were at farms place, and then we're just trying to figure out what infrastructure we needed and what kinds of money needs to come in and what kind of organizational structures we need. And we figured it out. California might look much more like sort of a strategic intervention, right? Where you have 3 or 4 test farms and both to see what grows, to build the alliances, and to reintroduce the public to ocean farming, right? Because aquaculture is the worst brand name in the grocery store, rightfully so. We need to restart that discussion. So start with some underwater community gardens and some small commercial farms, while also we're building the hatcheries, while we're building the processing plants on land and collecting the good scientific evidence on ecosystem services. Like that can all happen. All those balls can move at once this time, which is really exciting to us. And all these questions, should it be a co-op model or should it be sort of, circles of entrepreneurship with, a food hub in the center? There are all sorts of ways to do this that I don't know the answers of. I come at this very unideologically. I think of we know what the goals are. The goals are jobs, justice, climate mitigation. And the way to get there, I think none of us really know. It's like it's an open field. We all have lots of ideas and small pieces of the puzzle. And that's kind of what's exciting. I think I have more in common than, say, ocean conservation organizations. I have more in common with, say, the folks in the solar community on the Navajo reservations, or in Kentucky, trying to solarize the haulers, things like that, of trying to how to model this economically and build a new economy around it.
Thank you so much for reminding us that it is place-based and there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. I think there's a temptation out there to hear about your model and perceive it as the silver bullet that's going to produce food in our communities. And it's a great reminder. Thank you for reminding us that it really has to be contextualized within the specific social, cultural, economic dynamics of your particular community. And that goes back right again to the ownership model. I love that you speak to having worker ownership, because that really does allow that building these models that can help alleviate that.
It's funny, part of the things we learned, and I should have known this because I'm a curmudgeonly fisherman, but our trainings become, for fishermen specifically, not just for other folks so much, but fishermen, we hunt things, right? We're the last hunters in the ocean, and it is freaking exciting. I mean, I miss being out in the Beren Sea and out in the Grand Banks and 30-foot waves and chasing food around the country. And so, we're going to lose that in the transition of society. Whether you're a coworker, especially heavy cultural identity, with your coworker, with your farmer, you're a fisherman, we're going to lose pieces of our souls, really, right? And that's heartbreaking. The question is, what do we move into? Do we do the globalization jobs of call centers that they try to push us into when all the steel mills left? No, we want to create a certain kind of job and jobs with meaning. So I tell our fishermen, I say, listen, we can still own our own boats. We can not have bosses. We can have self-directed lives where we succeed and fail on our own terms, and we can have the pride of helping feed the country. We can work on the water. That's the core part of where our hearts are. And those are jobs we can still sort of write and sing songs about. That's what we look at for a metric. And I think when people think about jobs and economies, they forget about meaning, like how that is central. Like we need in this new climate economy, in the new regenerative economy, is to fill people's souls, because that's what's going to make them both go to work every day, but bring the creativity and the energy to keep the innovation moving forward. It's the heart that's going to do that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you for reminding us of that. Yeah.
I just want to not be too positive here, because you could do a whole nother show on all the challenges and problems and what keeps me up at night, right? I feel very good about this core replicable model. I mean, how do we stay ahead of the climate curve is a huge question for me. Like I grow personally shellfish and seaweeds that are in the southern region of their ecosystem. As that heads north, I need to know new things to grow. And are those things going to be economically viable? As we scale up to large numbers of farms along our coastline, well, are our crops just going to become a raw commodity or not, right? Will that drive the price down enough so actually we can't guarantee $1 a pound off the docks, right? And it looks much more like the land-based farming economy, and on and on. I mean, there are serious challenges out there, so I don't want to oversell it, and that's why we need all hands on deck. We need economists, we need policy people, we need scientists, we need sort of students and engineers, everybody here helping us do this so it's successful.
It's a great segue as we bring our conversation to a close. My next question for you, especially recognizing that, first off, thank you for taking the time, especially during Harvest Week, and I know you've got a big, you're attending your sailing to Washington D.C. for the Climate March next week. I'm curious what our listeners can do to support you, to support Greenwave. I know Greenwave is always looking for financial support to keep this work going. What can our listeners do to right now in this moment support this movement and get involved? Yeah,
I mean, I think there are a lot of ways, and that's what's it's just been so exciting to see this much energy around our work and so much the talent, people with all this incredible latent capacity coming. So, I mean, one way definitely is sponsor farmers, right? Greenwave has a farmer training program, and we need sponsorships because, we need to be able to support them. We need to be able to run programs. I think on the R&D side, we always have projects that need both good thinkers and good money in order to fund, like our mobile hatcheries, for example, that we can fit into shipping containers, or a site-by or the same our shipping container processing, partial processing facilities. There's all this work to be done there. And then, just this is a time, this is the great renaissance of food. Bring your talents and your creativity to bring your community together to cook these new dinner plates. right? To move bivalves and sea greens to the center, wild fish to the edges. Let's do that and create those moments as both a delicious, sort of loving way to spend time, but also to educate community and tell this story. I think both of those would. And so if you go to greenwave.org, the nonprofit website, and that's how you can support. Let's get in touch. It's a way you can sign up to be a farmer and donate. I'll say our challenge is, of course, way too much interest and activity and not enough resources. That's where we're at now. I spend my time in a heartbreaking way telling farmers. I mean, in California, I got a list of over 100 people that want to start farms, and we just don't have the capacity yet to do that. So that's where we're heading. And then I'll just close by saying the Climate March has been a really exciting thing. We're going to go travel 150 miles by boat to the Climate March with a message to the administration. There won't be any jobs or food on a dead planet. I mean, we look like Trump supporters, but we're not, because we care about NOAA funding, EPA funding. These are the things that have allowed us to be the entrepreneurs and keep working on the water. And the coalition that's come around us has been really unique and exciting. So we have some of the most famous chefs in the world. There's Zeppi, David Chang as sponsors. We have B Corp. So we have Ben & Jerry's, Patagonia, Dr. Bronner's, those folks also as sponsors. And then we have, the big greens, which is the Sierra Club. We have NRDC, Oceana. We have Pioneers as well. And that mix of folks, I think, is a really unique group to send us as fishermen and farmers to the march, to send a message that we care about jobs. We want to create new opportunities, and we need to protect our planet.
So if people want to support that, they would go to GoFundMe, right, and search for Climate March by Sea. If they can't make it there to the Climate March themselves, they can definitely support you to bringing this message there on their behalf.
Absolutely, yes. GoFundMe, and you search for March by Sea. And you can follow us. We'll be on social media during the trip. It'll be hashtag March by Sea. We'll be on Instagram, Facebook, and places like that, and people donate. We've had some great beer donations, so it's definitely to get rowdy. I mean, after all this, we're just fishermen. It's not a G-rated trip at all.
Well, great, Bren. Before I let you go, if there's any last thoughts or remarks you'd like to leave our listeners with, we're just so grateful here at Lift for the beautiful vision that you hold of an economic system that really can restore and regenerate not just our ecosystems, but also our social fabric of people really recognizing and treasuring each piece of food they put in their mouth and all the resources that went into creating that food and going back to communities that have been disenfranchised or marginalized from the economic system and having them take the lead. Really appreciate the way you emphasize the need for indigenous perspectives in leading this economy. And yeah, just so grateful. I'd love to hear your closing thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks so much to Lift Economy. You all have been incredible advisors. I mean, I am, at the end of the day, I haven't taken a math class since I was dropped out of high school when I was 14. It is the investor space is very complicated. You guys have just been incredible advisors. And I don't think you actually know how important that's been to us as we wade into those scary waters. I just close by saying the opportunity here is really to do ag and food right this time, right? Take the lessons of industrial agriculture, take the lessons of industrial aquaculture, not make the same mistakes. Our oceans are these incredible blank slates. Let's do it right. Let's make sure social justice is woven into the DNA of this new ocean economy. Let's make sure that leases are affordable to young farmers. Let's make sure our seeds and commons aren't privatized in this process. And let's make sure our infrastructures in poor communities that lift them out of poverty and create all these opportunities. That's what's so exciting, is to take the challenge of climate change, move out into our oceans, and really have this first time generations to really do food right and do what we think of as, let's come together and make a living on a living planet.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.